Did you know that the average Australian household owes over $250,000 in debt, and it's getting worse every single day? That's more than most people make in 5 years. Even more shocking, Australia now has one of the highest household debt levels in the entire world, ranking above countries like the US and the UK. If that doesn't scare you, it should, because this isn't just a numbers problem. It's a ticking time bomb that could explode across every part of your life. Your job, your mortgage, your savings, even the price of your groceries. So, what's really going on? Why are economists quietly sounding the alarm? And more importantly, how will this debt crisis crush not just the poor or unemployed, but everyone? In this video, we'll uncover 10 brutally honest reasons behind Australia's growing debt disaster and why no one is truly safe. Stick around. Reason number 7 might be the most terrifying of all. Number 10. Psychological toll, social strain. We often talk about debt in terms of dollars, percentages, and interest rates, but rarely do we talk about the emotional weight it carries. The truth is, Australia's debt crisis isn't just a financial problem, it's a mental health emergency in the making. As the cost of living skyrockets and wages remain flat, more Australians are falling into a cycle of debt they can't escape. The pressure to make ends meet, cover rising mortgage repayments, and juggle credit card bills is pushing people to the edge. A study by Beyond Blue revealed that financial stress is now one of the leading causes of anxiety and depression in Australia. Even worse, financial insecurity has been directly linked to an increase in relationship breakdowns, substance abuse, and suicide rates. Think about it. How many people do you know who are constantly worried about money? How many sleepless nights have been spent stressing over rent, loans, or simply feeding a family? The mental toll doesn't just affect individuals, it tears through families, workplaces, and entire communities. And it's not just the unemployed or low-income earners. Even middle-class professionals with stable jobs are feeling the heat. They may have decent salaries, but with massive mortgages and rising living costs, they're often just one unexpected expense away from disaster. It's a silent crisis because debt shame keeps people from speaking out, even when they're drowning. This is why the debt crisis is so dangerous. It's not only a threat to the economy, it's a slow, invisible force crushing the spirit of an entire nation. If you're finding this eye-opening, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe now for more deep dive breakdowns on financial trends and how to protect yourself from what's coming. Because staying informed might be the most powerful tool you have. Number 9. Business closures, unemployment. When debt begins to spiral, it's not just households that suffer. Businesses take a massive hit too, and the effects ripple across the entire economy. In Australia, small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, make up over 97% of all businesses. They're the lifeblood of local communities, providing jobs, services, and innovation. But right now, many of them are barely hanging on. As borrowing becomes more expensive due to rising interest rates, business owners are struggling to manage loan repayments, cover operating costs, and stay profitable. Add to that the skyrocketing cost of materials, energy, and wages, and you've got a dangerous cocktail of pressure that's causing a wave of closures and bankruptcies. When a business shuts down, it's not just the owner who suffers. Employees lose their jobs, suppliers lose clients, and entire communities can start to unravel. The unemployment rate may not reflect this pain immediately, but underemployment and job insecurity are quietly spreading. Many people are being forced into part-time or casual work, even if they want full-time stability. This leads to lower incomes, less consumer spending, and, ironically, more debt. What's worse is that many of these businesses took on extra debt during the pandemic just to survive. Government stimulus programs helped for a while, but now the bills are coming due, and there's no more safety net. The hospitality, retail, and construction sectors have been hit especially hard. Walk down any main street today and count the 4 lease signs. Each one represents a business dream that's died and jobs that won't be coming back anytime soon. The cycle is brutal. Debt leads to closures, closures lead to unemployment, and unemployment leads right back to more personal debt. It's a chain reaction that, if left unchecked, could reshape Australia's economy in devastating ways. Number 8. Youth debt education loans. For many young Australians, the path to a better future has always started with education. But today, that path is lined with debt, and it's getting steeper every year. The average HECS-HELP debt now sits at over $25,000, and for many graduates, that number is climbing faster than they can pay it down. Why? Because these loans are indexed to inflation, not interest rates. meaning that in high inflation years like we've seen recently, student debt can grow significantly even if you're making regular repayments. This creates a cruel situation. Many young people are working hard, paying what they can, yet watching their balances go up, not down. It's a financial treadmill with no finish line in sight. And it doesn't stop there. Because student loans aren't included in credit scores or standard debt reports, many young Australians don't even fully realise how much this debt will hold them back. Want to buy a house? That HECS debt could reduce how much a bank is willing to lend you. Want to start a business or invest in your future? Good luck qualifying for finance with a huge education loan hanging over your head. The psychological weight is just as heavy. Young adults entering the workforce already face a competitive job market, rising rent, and cost of living pressures. Pile on a growing education debt, and it's no wonder so many are feeling overwhelmed, stuck, and hopeless about their financial future. And here's the real kicker. Unlike other forms of debt, you don't even need to default to be in trouble. The system is designed in a way where simply existing in a high inflation economy can make your student debt worse over time without you doing anything wrong. In a country that once prided itself on giving everyone a fair go, this growing burden on the next generation could change everything. Number 7. Banking sector exposure. Australia's big banks are often seen as stable and reliable, but beneath the surface lies a massive vulnerability that very few people are talking about. Over 60% of all bank lending in Australia is tied to residential property, making our financial system heavily dependent on the housing market. That means when property prices fall or mortgage defaults rise, it's not just homeowners who are at risk. The entire banking sector could be shaken. During the housing boom, banks lent aggressively. Low interest rates, high demand, and easy access to credit created a perfect storm of borrowing. But now, with interest rates rising sharply and cost of living pressures squeezing households, many Australians are struggling to keep up with their mortgage repayments. And when people start defaulting on their loans, banks start losing money fast. What makes this even more dangerous is how concentrated Australian banks are in a single sector. Unlike more diversified systems in other countries, our banks have put most of their eggs in one basket: home loans. If a large number of people begin to default at the same time, triggered by job losses, rate hikes, or falling property values, it could lead to a wave of financial instability. This risk isn't theoretical. In fact, the Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, has already issued multiple warnings about the exposure of banks to mortgage stress. A housing correction doesn't just hurt property owners, it threatens the backbone of the financial system. And let's not forget investor confidence. If global markets lose faith in Australia's banking stability, it could trigger credit downgrades, restrict access to foreign capital, and push the economy into a deeper crisis. In short, when the housing market coughs, the banks catch the flu, and if it turns into pneumonia, we're all in trouble. Number 6. Property market volatility. For decades, the Australian property market has been seen as a safe bet, a place where values always go up and homeowners could build wealth with confidence. But that myth is starting to crack. After years of explosive growth, property prices are now swinging wildly, and the dream of home ownership is becoming a dangerous gamble for many Australians. During the low-interest era, buyers rushed into the market, often borrowing to their absolute limit. With record high prices and fierce competition, many paid far above market value, assuming prices would keep rising. But now, with the Reserve Bank of Australia hiking interest rates, the tide is turning. Monthly repayments have surged, and many homeowners are finding themselves under severe financial stress. This has triggered a sharp slowdown in property prices across several major cities. Some suburbs have seen homes drop 10 to 15% in value within a year, leaving many Australians in negative equity where their mortgage is worth more than their home. This is especially common among recent buyers who stretched their budgets during the peak. Property investors are also feeling the heat. With rising interest costs and falling rental yields, many are now selling at a loss, further flooding the market and accelerating price drops. And with buyer confidence shaken, fewer people are willing or able to enter the market, deepening the slowdown. What's even more worrying is how emotionally and financially tied Australians are to property. For many, it's their only major asset, their retirement plan, and their safety net. When the market becomes this unstable, it puts immense pressure not only on individual families but also on the broader economy. This level of volatility doesn't just threaten personal wealth, it poses a serious risk to national financial stability. especially in a country so deeply dependent on real estate. Number 5. Global economic pressures. While Australia faces its own internal financial challenges, it's also deeply connected to the global economy, and that's where things get even more complicated. In a world that's more intertwined than ever, economic shocks overseas can quickly turn into crises at home. And right now, several global forces are closing in on Australia's already fragile financial position. Let's start with the United States. As the US Federal Reserve continues to raise interest rates to tackle inflation, global borrowing costs rise in tandem. That means it becomes more expensive for Australian banks and businesses to borrow from international markets, tightening credit conditions back home. On top of that, a strong US dollar puts pressure on the Australian dollar, making imports like fuel, electronics, and food more expensive for consumers. Then there's China, Australia's largest trading partner. A slowdown in China's economy, particularly its property sector, has already reduced demand for key Australian exports like iron ore and coal. As Chinese growth stalls, Australia's export income shrinks, directly impacting government revenue and business profits. This is especially concerning for regions heavily reliant on mining and resources. Meanwhile, geopolitical tensions, such as the war in Ukraine, trade disruptions in the South China Sea, and rising tensions with China, are making global markets more unstable. These conflicts affect supply chains, increase energy prices, and create an environment of economic uncertainty. All of this contributes to higher inflation, more market volatility, and greater financial stress for average Australians. In this interconnected world, Australia can't simply shut its doors and weather the storm. Global headwinds are blowing stronger than ever, and they're hitting us at a time when our own economy is already stretched thin. The result? A perfect storm that threatens to make our debt crisis even harder to escape. Number 4. Government deficits, stimulus hangover. During the height of the pandemic, the Australian government did what many others around the world did. It opened the floodgates on spending. Massive stimulus packages like JobKeeper and JobSeeker boosts, business grants, and cash handouts were rolled out to keep the economy afloat. And to be fair, they worked temporarily. They helped prevent a full-blown economic collapse and kept people employed during uncertain times. But now, the bill has arrived, and it's a big one. Australia's national debt has soared to over AUD 1 trillion, and it's still growing. That's the highest level in modern history. And unlike personal debt, which you might be able to pay off or walk away from, government debt has long-term consequences for every single citizen. Running deficits for a short time during a crisis is one thing, but continuing to overspend without a clear plan to repay that debt leads to a dangerous cycle. The more the government borrows, the more it has to spend on interest payments. That means less money for essential services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure in the long run. Eventually, the government faces two choices: raise taxes or cut spending, both of which directly affect ordinary Australians. And let's not forget about inflation. A large part of today's inflation problem can be traced back to the surge of stimulus money that flooded the economy. When too much money chases too few goods, prices inevitably rise. And now that the spending tap has been turned off, many households are left facing higher costs of living without the financial cushion they got used to. This stimulus hangover is the painful aftermath of economic survival mode. The short-term fix may have worked, but the long-term damage is now coming into view, and it's making Australia's debt crisis much harder to dig out of. Number 3. Rising interest rates. One of the most immediate and painful triggers of Australia's debt crisis is the sharp and sudden rise in interest rates. After years of record low rates that encouraged borrowing and spending, the Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, has switched gears, aggressively hiking rates in an attempt to control runaway inflation. While this move is aimed at stabilising the economy, it's creating financial chaos for millions of Australians. Mortgage holders are among the hardest hit. For someone with a $600,000 loan, even a 2% rate increase could mean paying hundreds of dollars more each month, money that many families simply don't have. And with rates rising as quickly as they have, many households are experiencing mortgage stress for the first time in their lives. In fact, recent surveys suggest that more than 1 in 3 borrowers are now struggling to meet repayments. But it's not just homeowners. Small businesses that took on debt during the pandemic are now facing much higher costs to service those loans. Some are cutting staff, others are shutting down completely. Even renters aren't safe. Landlords are passing on the extra costs, leading to soaring rental prices in most major cities. And then there's consumer spending. As people devote more of their income to debt repayments, they have less to spend on essentials, slowing down the entire economy. That means fewer sales for businesses, more layoffs, and an even deeper financial spiral. Worse still, interest rate hikes are a blunt instrument. They can't fix the underlying causes of inflation, like supply chain disruptions or global energy prices, but they do hit every borrower hard and fast. In essence, rising interest rates are squeezing the financial life out of households and businesses alike. They were meant to cool the economy, but for many, they're freezing hope altogether. Number 2, stagnant wage growth. While the cost of living in Australia has surged over the past decade, housing, groceries, fuel, energy, you know what hasn't surged? Wages. In fact, wage growth in Australia has been shockingly slow, and for many workers, it's barely kept up with inflation, if at all. This isn't just a personal frustration, it's a critical factor in the nation's debt crisis. For years, Australians have been working harder without seeing a meaningful increase in their take-home pay. Meanwhile, everyday expenses continue to rise. This growing gap between what people earn and what life costs has forced many households to rely on credit cards, personal loans, and buy now, pay later services just to stay afloat. The result? More debt, mounting interest, and no real ability to pay it off. What's worse is that this wage stagnation isn't limited to low-income jobs. Even skilled professionals in sectors like healthcare, education, and tech are reporting minimal pay increases despite rising workloads and responsibilities. And for young workers trying to start their lives, buying a home, starting a family, investing in their future, the situation is even more grim. Their income simply isn't enough to keep up with modern financial demands. On a national level, stagnant wages are also bad for economic growth. When people earn less, they spend less, which slows down businesses, reduces profits, and limits job creation. It becomes a vicious cycle. Low wages lead to less spending, which leads to weaker businesses, which leads to fewer wage increases. To make matters worse, inflation has eaten away at what little wage growth there was. So even when salaries technically go up, their real-world purchasing power often goes down. For the average Aussie, it feels like treading water in a rising tide, working just as hard but falling further behind. This is why wage stagnation isn't just an economic issue. It's a debt trap in disguise. Number 1, ballooning household debt. Australia is facing a household debt crisis that few are talking about openly, but it's one of the most serious threats to the country's economic stability. Right now, Australia ranks among the top countries in the world for household debt-to-income ratio, meaning that, on average, Australians owe more than twice what they earn annually. That's not just a financial red flag, it's a full-blown warning siren. Over the past decade, easy access to credit, low interest rates, and a booming property market encouraged Australians to borrow heavily. Mortgages, credit cards, car loans, personal loans, and buy now, pay later schemes have all contributed to a growing mountain of debt. But now, with interest rates climbing and the cost of living exploding, many households are finding themselves drowning in repayments. For many, this debt wasn't taken on recklessly, it was necessary. People borrowed just to keep up with basic needs: housing, education, medical expenses, and sometimes even groceries. The problem is, when wages stay flat and interest rates rise, those debts become increasingly unmanageable. Missed payments, late fees, and compounding interest create a snowball effect that can crush even middle-income families. What makes this situation even more dangerous is the psychological trap it creates. Australians are culturally conditioned to view debt, especially mortgage debt, as good debt. But when nearly 3 out of 4 households have some form of personal debt and 1 in 5 is under serious financial stress, it's clear the system is no longer sustainable. High household debt limits financial freedom. It reduces savings, delays retirement, and makes people vulnerable to even the smallest economic shock, like a medical emergency or sudden job loss. And when millions of people are in the same boat, the impact doesn't stay personal. It becomes a national crisis in slow motion. As we continue unraveling the deeper layers of this crisis, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We're building a quiet map of voices across the world. If something in this story struck a chord, let us know in the comments below. And if you'd like to stay with us on this unfolding journey, you're welcome to subscribe,